Grazie. Sono felicissima di essere anche questa volta qui con voi, di vedervi. La prima cosa che mi viene da dire, ovviamente, è un ringraziamento, prima di tutto, veramente a voi, a tutti quelli che ormai, perché Mediaguro è entrato nel 12° anno, dicasi, e quindi, voglio dire, io ogni volta ogni volta penso sempre che veramente è una bella storia, no? Sono sempre molto sorpresa e quindi siete voi che infondete la voglia di andare avanti, quindi grazie tante. E vorrei ringraziare però anche quelli che ci permettono questo piccolo miracolo di Mite Mediaguro che da 12 anni si ripete sulla nostra scena milanese e nazionale, che sono i nostri partner. Adesso abbiamo un partner, una collaborazione con Accenture, che ringrazio, e abbiamo poi i nostri storici, Artemide con le sue innovazioni, Fastweb con il tema delle telecomunicazioni, la Fondazione Fiera, partner storico di Mite Mediaguro, veramente da anni collaboriamo insieme, il patrocinio della Fondazione Cariplo e la Regione Lombardia. La Regione Lombardia, non a caso siamo qui in questo bellissimo auditorium, ringraziamo perché ci hanno offerto appunto l'ospitalità, e con la Regione Lombardia abbiamo un progetto in corso ormai da 3 anni che si chiama Digital Award, e qui con noi c'è l'assessore regionale allo sviluppo economico Mauro Parolini, che inviterei a salire un attimo, così spieghiamo, intanto che diamo il tempo ai nostri. Grazie. Questo noi da 3 anni portiamo avanti un progetto che si chiama Digital Award, il coraggio di innovare. Mediaguro guarda all'innovazione, lo sappiamo, ma ci guarda anche la Regione, così come gli altri nostri partner, quindi siamo un po' come dei paladini dell'innovazione. Assessore, a lei la parola per un benvenuto al nostro pubblico. Grazie per averci ospitato qui nella sua sede.
Grazie, buonasera, bello vedere un pubblico così numeroso. Ho visto le code fuori, mi dispiace che i controlli abbiano rallentato l'entrata, però era bello anche vedere tanta gente che vuole entrare a certificare il successo di una modalità di affronto del tema dell'innovazione che Maria Grazia Mattei porta avanti in questo modo dinamico e coinvolgente. Quindi complimenti per il pubblico, per tutti coloro che partecipano, per gli sponsor importanti. Ecco, Regione Lombardia è ben lieta di poter essere parte di questo progetto, anche ospitandovi nella nostra sede. Ho buona memoria di quello che abbiamo visto l'anno scorso, quando abbiamo consegnato i premi, un bel esempio del fatto che l'innovazione non è solo figlia delle multinazionali, delle grandi imprese, che pure hanno un ruolo fondamentale. Noi abbiamo una rete importante di università aperte, capaci di coinvolgere, e abbiamo tantissima gente che si mette insieme e che è forte di un'idea, forte di una capacità di comprendere un problema, è capace di innovare. Ecco, il premio vuole essere questo, cioè stimolare l'innovazione, mettere in movimento le singole persone, invitarle a mettersi insieme tra di loro, dare loro un riconoscimento che serva anche per dare un po' di forza, dare gambe a idee che spesso meritano di essere riconosciute e fatte proprie magari anche di realtà più grandi. Insomma, l'innovazione è qualcosa che ha a che fare con tutti noi. Possiamo subirla o esserne protagonisti. Allora, l'iniziativa di Mediaguro, insieme con Regione Lombardia, con i suoi sponsor, è quella di riconoscere le buone idee, premiarle, ma soprattutto per farle conoscere fuori nel modo più ampio possibile. Allora, io spero, anzi sono certo, che l'iniziativa di quest'anno, che ha molto a che fare con Milano, che è centrata sulla moda e sul design, produrrà un buon successo come è stato l'anno scorso e anche migliore. Anzi, mi aspetto un fiorire di proposte. Ecco, purtroppo ne selezioneremo alcune rispetto ad altre, ma sceglieremo le migliori. Questa tra l'altro è un'iniziativa che viene subito dopo quel grande bando che abbiamo fatto sulla moda e sul design, sull'innovazione, a cui hanno partecipato 55 aggregazioni con un numero molto grande di soggetti, a cui abbiamo erogheremo 30 milioni di contributi a fondo perduto, mettendo in movimento iniziative per 62 milioni di euro con proposte di innovazione in questi settori molto importanti. Ecco, insomma, io credo che la Lombardia è la prima regione italiana in economia, ma anche nella cultura, in quasi tutti i settori. È una delle prime in Europa anche per questo, perché c'è gente che si mette in campo, che si muove, che non aspetta gli eventi ma cerca di precederli. Allora questa iniziativa mi sembra che stia esattamente dentro il solco di questa visione, quindi complimenti e poi mi raccomando datevi da fare e vinca il migliore. Grazie.
Grazie Assessore, grazie al nostro Assessore innovativo, ce la faremo. Ognuno di voi è una, come dire, non vorrei dire è un enzima, quindi questo premio Digital Award, come ha detto l'assessore, fondamentalmente ci serve anche per mappare quelle che sono le realtà più dinamiche, le persone che hanno voglia di cambiamento e che ci hanno provato, quindi è una bella occasione per conoscerci in Lombardia, per dare forza e risalto a chi ha delle idee, chi ci ha provato, chi si è messo, e questo l'ha detto benissimo Mauro Parolini, quindi mi aspetto che ci sia un tantam. Il tema è, come avete visto nel video, design e moda, quindi ma che siano imprese, che siano start-up, che siano giovani che hanno delle belle idee, noi siamo qua pronti ad ascoltare, raccoglieremo, e poi l'appuntamento è a novembre con la serata che si svolgerà qui nel teatro, nell'auditorium, ma basta che vi teniate in contatto col sito Il Coraggio di Innovare, Digital Award Il Coraggio di Innovare, e lì c'è tutto il percorso che faremo. Ecco, sarete anche chiamati a votare online, quindi mi aspetto collaborazione come da veri Mitte Mediaguro. Grazie. Molte grazie. Adesso rubo ancora 2 minuti per dirvi 2 cose che mi sembra a questo punto importante, dando il tempo anche alle persone di entrare. Una è questa, sono un po' di considerazioni per chi ci conosce ma anche per chi non ci conosce. Mite Mediaguro, dicevo prima, ha 12 anni, è entrato nel 12° anno, abbiamo appena finito, il 5 luglio chiuderemo il primo semestre di programmazione, quindi insomma noi il nostro lavoro lo portiamo avanti. Qual è il punto di vista di Mediaguro? Mettersi noi, cosa vogliamo fare? Siamo tutti nella stessa identica condizione, che è quella siamo persone che assistono a dei grandi cambiamenti di paradigma, e quello che vorremmo capire è esattamente quello che sta succedendo. Come possiamo farlo? Con l'aiuto di voci autorevoli perché sono persone che hanno sperimentato sul campo tutta una serie di processi, hanno sviluppato pensieri, delle riflessioni. Questo tema del confronto per noi, Mitte Mediaguro e Mitte Mediaguristi, è centrale. Confronto di idee, scambi di idee. Che ci sia un futuro che ci aspetta, dove le informazioni hanno la mole, la quantità e l'importanza che ormai abbiamo capito. Ora non dobbiamo più dire ci dobbiamo rendere conto che il mondo sarà digitale, siamo in piena era digitale, c'è poco da fare, siamo tutti in una transizione, dicevo, i cambiamenti di paradigma nel modo di vivere, di lavorare, di essere delle persone, di relazionarci, è importante che lo capiamo adesso, o quantomeno che ci sintonizziamo con tutta questa realtà in mutazione. E il nostro futuro, appunto, informazioni, connettività, che è sempre più alla base di tutto, con una connettività globale, almeno nel mondo occidentale, e sistemi di comunicazione che sono sistemi come sempre più sofisticati, fino appunto oggi a parlare di questo grande trend della intelligenza artificiale, che non è una moda, perché l'intelligenza artificiale non è scoppiata adesso, sono anni e anni e anni di ricerche. O io quando ho cominciato a occuparmi di mondo digitale era gli anni '80 e già allora c'era chi si occupava di intelligenza artificiale. chiaramente non ai livelli di oggi, perché i computer oggi fanno quello che allora non facevano intere stanze di computer che occupavano pareti, e che oggi un cellulare fa quello che facevano i computer degli anni 80, quindi immaginate il cambiamento che c'è in corso e l'accelerazione che c'è adesso su questi temi. Grandi sono i trend, quindi di sviluppi tecnologici, questo appunto dell'intelligenza artificiale, ma poi ci sono anche delle riflessioni da fare in merito alla cultura che cambia, in merito alla creazione di contenuti, alla creatività, in merito al lavoro. Sono tante le domande aperte. Allora Media Guru fa questo lavoro quando è possibile, grazie veramente ai nostri ospiti che sono sempre anche loro volontari, siamo tutti volontari veramente, accolgono volentieri l'invito, partecipano come appunto anche stasera Mark Curtis, e noi svolgiamo un po' questi momenti di incontro proprio per questo. Vorremmo veramente esplorare, Media Guru esplora, vorremmo tutti insieme esplorare questi temi e prepararci, perché il tema è quello, vorremmo poter avere, come dire, dei cardini un po' solidi per poterci orientare in questi grandi cambiamenti. Ora è il momento, siamo nella fase non della meraviglia tecnologica, ma nella fase della comprensione, la voglia di comprendere i cambiamenti appunto in atto, la nostra situazione, e se è possibile sbirciare in un futuro che non è neanche tanto lontano, perché sono già i segnali di questi cambiamenti sono già sotto gli occhi di tutti, quindi uniamoci e cerchiamo di capire. Stasera Media Guru cosa ha fatto? Come abbiamo detto, che è una sorta di piattaforma, di laboratorio, forse è più giusto chiamarlo laboratorio, grazie al vostro aiuto, alla vostra partecipazione, a quello di tanti personaggi che ormai anche a livello internazionale si passano parola, noi esploriamo, ogni anno ci diamo un po' come dei fili conduttori per capire come muoversi, cogliendo il più possibile dei trend, per rispondere a delle domande che poi sentiamo, perché è un progetto italiano pure in chiave internazionale, ma è un progetto che serve un po' anche al nostro paese, secondo me, per capire e accelerare il più possibile questo processo di transizione nella comprensione. Quindi noi facciamo appunto questo lavoro. Allora quest'anno ci siamo trovati a sviluppare un tema, un filone che è molto particolare, che è il rapporto natura e tecnologia, ma soprattutto appunto natura, tecnologia, uomo, comunicazione, e perché lì poi si giocano questi sistemi appunto di comunicazione molto sofisticati che già vengono attivati. Allora oggi bisogna chiederci cosa sta succedendo, come sta veramente cambiando la nostra comunicazione, la nostra conversazione. Uno dei nostri relatori, per esempio, che ha lanciato una bellissima, con la sua lecture Next Nature, si chiama Van Mensworth, l'abbiamo portato al Museo della Scienza, è entrato nel tema della Next Nature, quindi di una natura che è come dire una sintesi tra tecnica, quindi tra artificialità e natura. È molto interessante, tanto che in qualche modo lo vede come una chiave questa definizione Next Nature per una sorta di ecologia dell'era digitale. Poi abbiamo invitato ultimamente Li-Ning Yao dal Media Lab di Boston, perché lei con la programmazione dei materiali, con la creazione di materiali viventi che lavorano con i batteri piuttosto che con altre sostanze riprese, studiate dalla natura, ha lanciato un po' l'idea che ci potessero essere dei processi ibridi che sintetizzano questa relazione tra biologia e tecnologia, quindi altro scenario importantissimo. E stasera finalmente, ho tirato più lungo che potevo, scusatemi, stasera finalmente Mark Curtis è con noi, e con lui vorremmo entrare nella dimensione del tema appunto che riguarda il linguaggio, la conversazione, nel rapporto con tecnologie tante sofisticate, ma anche storiche, se vogliamo, ma soprattutto sofisticate come l'intelligenza artificiale, diciamo, che più che una tecnologia è una dimensione nuova. Quindi io vorrei pregare Mark Curtis a venire qua, lo accoglierei con un bel applauso. Lui è cofondatore e direttore di Fjord, società di Accenture Interactive specializzata in service design, autore di un bellissimo libro. Your book is?
Distraction, Being Human in the Digital Age.
Ci arriverò a pronunciare l'inglese come lui. È un libro che è molto interessante, non vedo l'ora di prendere e di leggerlo. Ed è qui per introdurci a riflettere proprio su questo cambiamento di paradigma nel mondo della comunicazione e della conversazione tra uomo e macchina. La scena è tua, Mark.
Grazie.
Good luck. Ciao, grazie.
So first of all, I must apologize for not speaking in Italian. My Italian, I've been working on it, but it's not good enough to talk about what I'm going to talk about today. And secondly, I want to thank you very much for having me here at Meet the Media Guru. I just sent a photograph of the event to my family on our family WhatsApp group, and my second daughter, who's 27 and is in India, sent back a smiley face with tears running down it. And she said, if only they knew what you're like, Daddy, like we do, they would never call you a media guru. And she's right. So I want to talk about conversations. I think that we're about to see an inflection point in technology which is going to change the way in which we think of conversation. And I think it's very important. I'm just checking the time because I have 40 minutes and I don't want to overstep. It's very important that we think about that right now because it will determine some of the things that we do next. And the more I've worked with this idea, the more I've realized what a very big topic it is. And I think tonight we'll leave a lot of unanswered questions. I should warn you that, if what I say is successful, if you like what I have to say. So I cannot cover it all, but I can perhaps begin the conversation about conversations and where we go. So, thousands of years ago, the Egyptian god Thoth, who was the equivalent of Mercury or Hermes, he was a giver of gifts, came down to earth and he visited the Egyptian king Tharmis. And he said to Tharmis, I have a new technology, a Greek word, I have a new technology to bring you. And the king said, what is it? And Thoth said, it is the gift of writing, and it is a gift I want to give to your people. Would you like to take it? Tharmis said, well, can you explain to me what writing is? So the god explained it. And then to the god's surprise, Tharmis said, I need to think about that. Can you come back in a week or so, and I'll give you my answer? So the god flew away, and he came back a week later, and he said to the king, so do you want this gift? And to his astonishment, the king said no. And he said no because this discovery of yours will create forgetfulness in the learner's souls. These words are from Plato, who wrote up the story. So what Plato is trying to tell us is that for every step forward we get with technology, we get one back. We take one step back. And the step back in this case, and this is what Tharmis was worried about, is that if we can write everything down, we will forget to remember things. So technology is not a neutral thing. It does have effects, and that is for me, that is a founding principle which I'm going to expand on now. Now, the Greeks actually talked a lot about conversation, and Socrates was famous partly for his presence in symposia. And symposia were conversations which were deliberately constructed as a social event in Athenian society. I have to say that they were largely men. I'll come back to women in a moment. They were largely men, but they were conversations between men, all kinds of men, who talked about all sorts of things. And Socrates, referring to conversations with other people, came out with the quote that the unexamined life is not worth living by a human being. What he's trying to say is that through conversations we discover ourselves, and we discover more about ourselves, and we discover more about other people. But it was not the end of conversations. Conversations flourished in symposia. Hundreds of years later, thousands of years later, they flourished in my hometown, in London, in the 18th century, in coffee houses. So coffee houses were an absolute phenomenon in London. Early 17th century, there were none. Within 30, 40 years, they were all over the city, and they were places where everybody went. So much did everybody go there that they were regarded as, and still are regarded as, being one of the sort of founding ideas in British democracy. The idea that shoemakers, tailors, lords, and wine merchants could all get together in the same place and, poring over newspapers, could talk to each other and talk about a whole range of different, often political, but definitely social issues. And coffee houses were seen by a Frenchman, no less, as the seats of English liberty. So the French actually took the idea to some extent, and within 50 to 100 years, you see the same thing happening in France. It had a particularly French twist, which was that it didn't take place in coffee houses, it took place in salons. So in pre-revolutionary France, certainly in aristocratic France, philosophers and aristocrats and nobles and other people, it was a little bit less socialist in France at that stage as it was in coffee houses in England, met together. And frequently, this was actually driven by women, because the patronesses of the big salons were usually women like Madame de Staël. And so conversation, again, was something which became an important part of society, an important part of the way in which people discovered who they were. And again, as in coffee houses and as in symposia, it was framed by a construct which enabled free-flowing ideas and free-flowing conversation. So I think these three stages, the Greek symposia, the coffee houses, and the salons of France, were really, in their own ways, were heydays of conversation, structured and unstructured. Since then, we've seen technology come along and influence conversation. So there was a form of technology. There was coffee, there was wine. It's kind of a technology which influenced conversations. But more recently, there's technology which we would recognize as technology now. And I want to particularly focus on, as that technology has influenced conversations, what's been added and what has been taken away. So the first kind of conversational technology was letter writing. And that, of course, has been around for thousands of years, and that's a medieval letter. And what letter writing did was it introduced permanence into the world of conversations, because a conversation between two people, we still look at the letters of Abelard, between Eloise and Abelard in the 11th, 12th century in northern France. We can see the conversation going on between them. But the conversation was also asynchronous. So it didn't take place at the same time in the same space. It was jolted. It was disrupted by the fact that they weren't together. Same thing was true with the next technology which came along. Actually, the next one that came along to influence conversations was telegrams. So the telegram on the right here is actually a telegram to my mother in the Second World War to tell her that the 22-year-old man that she loved, she was 19, had died over northern France in an aeroplane. He was a fighter pilot. So that's a very asynchronous form of conversation. In fact, that conversation, sadly for my mother, came to a stop right then and there. So it's a real historical thing. But it's also got permanence to it. So my mother died very recently, and I was looking through her papers, and I found this. I'd never seen it before. It was quite a shock, as you can imagine. I knew about her first fiancé before my father. But it was a shock to discover this piece of paper, but it also reminded me of the permanence of paper and the permanence of telegrams. So let's move on from letters and telegrams. We move on to, pretty rapidly after telegrams, we move on to telephones. And what telephones added to conversations was they brought synchronicity back in. So now you could have that synchronous conversation with somebody else, but you would have that over a very long distance. So at this stage, something interesting happened, which distance began to die at this stage. Not totally, but to a large extent, it was no longer quite so easy to be a very long way away from other people and unobtainable, because now, as telephones began to spread across the world, telephone cables, you could contact people all across the world, and therefore distance became less of an issue for conversations. Of course, we've seen that much more dramatically with the internet. So let's talk about the internet. So some of you may never have seen one of these, I'm horrified to say, and some of you may never have even heard this. The noise that a dial-up modem would make 2 or 3 times a day in your house or your business before the flood, for some of you, back in the early 1990s. And I'm very glad that I never have to listen to that again in my house. When I set up my first business in digital, which was in 1993 with a colleague called Mike Beeston in London, Mike and I spent a long time over beer discussing what we were going to call it, because nobody understood what we were talking. Very few people we met understood what we were talking about with this new thing that was happening. A few, but not many. Certainly not the clients we wanted to make money with. And we tried to look for a word that it would explain to them the principle of what was happening in media. remember, this is 1993. No one was talking, well, very few people were talking about this. And the word we picked on, rightly or wrongly, was interactive. There's a curious irony that we're now part of Accenture Interactive. Back in 1993, interactive was a new word. And we talked about why interactive, and Mike's view, he was always ahead of me on this one, was that this is the first medium you can talk back to. And it's a good idea for us to reflect on that, because of course now that sounds completely, well, obviously, but in 1993 the idea you could talk back to a newspaper was, except by sending a letter, which is not really a very successful way of communicating, was bizarre. But now you could suddenly talk back. So interactive was a huge step forward in the way in which we could converse through technology, because we now could converse. What we lost at that time, I would suggest, is privacy. So we talk about the privacy thing now. We started losing privacy back in 93, 94, 95, when the internet came along. It was really, really obvious very rapidly that it was going to be very difficult to keep digital documents inside any one particular domain. They would leak. Do you know what osmosis is? They would leak osmotically through the membrane between a company and the outside world. And politicians and businessmen have discovered that at a great price, and are still discovering it at the moment. So interactive, that's the thing we get. Privacy, it's probably the thing that's been taken away. And one of the things that happened at the end of the 1990s, when we were busy trying to figure out what this all meant, was, I think, a very significant book, the Clue Train Manifesto, was published. And one of the things that they said in that book, which was enormously important, they said, markets are in fact conversations. So it's a very important quote. We'll come back to that just a little later. They also looked at the way in which the early web was developing, and they made the point, and this quote actually came from somebody in a large corporation. They said, customers are talking to us, but we don't listen to them. The way they said it was, the Clue Train stopped 3 or 4 times a day for 10 years, but they never took delivery of the messages they were getting. And early websites didn't do it very well either. We designed loads of early websites, but largely they were about broadcast. They weren't about getting feedback. But that all changed, and we began to see things change very quickly. And as those new things emerged, and we've seen a proliferation of different ways, because now it's not just the internet, it's about chunking it up into different ways in which we communicate. And I've just picked 3. You could argue that there are many others, and yes, there are, but we haven't really got time tonight to explore them. So let's just look at 3. So email was interesting because although that was probably the first we all began to use a lot over the internet, email actually mimicked mail, as the name suggests. And in one particular way, it has a start and an end. Even now, I will typically start an email by writing, Dear Olof, what do you think about blah, blah, blah? I might cut the dear, but I'd certainly put a name in at the beginning. And it has an end as well, kind regards, or love, or whatever it may be. But then you move on to instant messaging. I'm thinking about web-based instant messaging here, not yet, I'll come on to this, mobile instant messaging. And the start and end of an instant message is actually unclear. I see it now with Skype for Business, which we use in Accenture, which I don't like very much as a tool. And one of the reasons I find it a bit difficult is people can just pop up and talk to you without any opening. So the etiquette is completely different. And you don't know when a conversation is finished either. It just fades away or dies, or you can just ignore it. And then Twitter, there is no start and end on Twitter. There is almost no start and end to anything on Twitter. It's just this constant stream. So think about this, conversational. These are 3 very different, fundamentally different kinds of etiquettes about the way we think about conversation. And then, of course, this came along. Not this particular one, the iPhone, 10 years ago, and even before that with mobile phones. And what they brought to us was the ability to be spontaneous, the ability, no matter where you are, to get in touch with someone or eventually to get in touch with a piece of information. What I think they took away was our ability to focus. And this is the book I wrote in 2005. I called it Distraction because it was already clear then that the combination of mobile and social media was going to lead to a complete inability for people to focus on the things in front of them, typically other people, because of the seductive siren call of the potentiality of everything else. It's very difficult when you can get hold of everything else at any given moment in your life to pay really complete attention to what's in front of you, unless that person is particularly mesmerizing. And we see this playing out now, and we see it playing out. All of us who have families have seen this play out. We've seen it play out in business, where people have had to begin to learn to ruthlessly focus in meetings and not be distracted by the medium around them. So the impact this has had is that it has made one-to-one, face-to-face conversations much more difficult. So again, something's been taken away. And with mobile, again, we get this proliferation of media happening. So in this case, you have SMS, which is insistent and character limited. So again, because of the character limitation in SMS, the etiquette changes yet again. We all know it. What you do in text speak is very different from what you do when you've got more space to, and as a result, the etiquette changes completely. You have social media, where again, the start and end of a conversation is actually unclear. It's more like a stream. And now you have chat apps, which are taking over in many ways, and they have both synchronous and asynchronous conversation. I had this debate with somebody this morning. He was very good on it. But the conversation on WhatsApp is often synchronous between people. And then you'll see when you've got a group of people communicating, I don't know how many of you have experienced this, the conversation will die, but no one goes back to that particular conversation in a while. It might take a day or two before it grows up. So you get bulges of synchronous conversation and then nothing in between. And yet equally, if it's one-on-one, you can have conversations which are asynchronous, a message sent, and then you wait 12 hours and eventually you get a message back. So again, very, very different manners and etiquette about the way in which we do this. And if you think about just the last 3 or 4 slides I've shown, we're now juggling in our heads, how do we talk to each other one-on-one? How do we talk to each other through these 5, 6, 7 different media which we're still, which we're constantly using? So I think the question then to ask is, well, what does it take to be human in the digital age? And I want to look now at some technologies which are emerging and the way in which we have begun to try and put humanity back in. Now, I don't think there's any single engineer in the world or a Zuckerberg who has sat back and said, we need to put humanity back in digital media. I don't think that's happened. I think what's happened is we've just done it in a way, or many different corporations have done it because there's been a demand for it, because we've felt instinctively that what we're looking at was just a little bit too clinical, and we wanted to bring back something more human into it. So let's have a look at how that's worked. So this is what interacting with a computer looked like only, well, for most people, only about, 25 years ago. And for some people, it still looks like this if you're doing coding, or some coding. So there's no humanity in this, or at least none that I can detect. There may be developers who can look at it and say, yes, I see the humanity in it. I don't. This is quite inhuman. And what we've seen over the years is basically a reintroduction of body language. Because one of the things that I'm doing, and I'm checking it all the time with you, because I'm looking at you and I'm thinking, what's your body language? And now you're smiling, so I think you're probably looking at the Trump video. But body language is massively important. Think back to the command line interface. That took body language out of it altogether. Messaging takes body language out, but not entirely, because emojis have come in. So I told a story at the beginning, which was true, about my daughter having just literally messaged me on WhatsApp seconds before I came up on stage with a smiley with tears down it. So she was sending me some body language. That's what emojis are. I know they've expanded, and now you can send cats and dogs and bottles of wine and cocktails and all sorts of stuff. But the original ones, and the ones that you still see used the most, are actually substitutes for, they are digital body language. We're craving the ability to put this into. It's actually quite surprising that in thousands of years of letter writing, nobody thought of doing this. And I've been wondering about why that is, and maybe it's the keyboard that gave us a combination of tools in order to do it. But maybe it's the technology. Maybe we just felt the technology wasn't warm enough, and we've been trying to do that. And then came pictures. So I think pictures have become part of the way in which we communicate because we're trying to show body language to each other. And if you look at the most popular pictures on Earth, they're selfies. So why are we sending selfies? Because partly we're self-obsessed, but also because we want to demonstrate some kind of... All these people are smiling, they're waving, they're sending body language, which is also, of course, now why video has become so popular. So wait for the sound. Can we have the sound up? That's a shame it's not... here we go. So, This is my son. And if you just look at that woman, she just realised they're playing Nirvana. So she's a middle-aged woman sitting in a school somewhere in England just a few weeks ago, and her body language said something to me. And I'm showing you this because I was sent this on WhatsApp by my daughter. I didn't video this. I was somewhere else at the time. So here all of a sudden is my 10-year-old son playing drums at school, but there's all sorts of body language that I instinctively read into this without knowing that I was reading it in. So one of the things I could see is, he's called Billy, he's 10, he doesn't concentrate very easily like most 10-year-old boys. Boy, is he focused in this. I've never seen him so focused. So I'm reading his body language, and I'm reading the body language of his teacher, who is encouraging him. The video here was sending me a whole lot of rich detail. Now, I could just have had a message saying, Billy played a Nirvana song tonight at the school concert, and that would have been good, and I'd been very proud. I'm a lot more proud because I got this, and it gave me a lot more rich contextual information about what was going on. So, video is another way in which we're bringing humanity and body language into stuff. And then the last way is that we're now beginning to use messaging as a form of commerce. So remember what the Clue Train manifesto authors said. They said, markets are conversations. It was incredibly far-sighted. And that didn't really come true, literally, until the Chinese began to do this just a few years back with WeChat. So WeChat is, as you probably all know, if you don't, it's worth checking out, is fundamentally a conversational messaging interface. But they've squeezed practically everything else they can, everything, into that conversational interface, including commerce. And I remember when this first began to emerge, people saying, well, that doesn't make sense. How would you put together shopping and a messaging service? Well, markets have always been conversations. We used to go to markets in big towns and cities and villages, and we would buy stuff there, but we would also talk to people. It was a foundational place where information was exchanged by human beings in small or larger societies. So why shouldn't that be the same case on the internet? And that's effectively what's happened with these messaging services. And you're probably aware, but you can now buy things through Facebook Messenger. So this is not just happening in China. It's becoming very big over here as well. So now we get to a new inflection point, and I'm just going to shift gear here a bit, because I want to start talking about some new things. That was body language coming into media. Now I want to talk about some new stuff coming in, which I think is really shifting the game profoundly. And the first is voice. So we're seeing voice come in with Amazon Echo, with Google at Home, and with now Apple have announced their home device, so I don't think that's on the market yet. How many people have actually played with an Alexa? Okay, so not so many, and it's really annoying the way these big tech companies roll stuff out to the UK, to the US, and then the UK, and then gradually everywhere else. So it is pretty interesting, and I have one at home, and I have to say several things have happened. So one of the things that's happened is that it's suddenly rendered every other device in the home as relatively stupid, in fact, pretty stupid. So I've invested lots of money in Sonos Home Entertainment, about £700, so quite a lot of money. I love it. I still love it. The sound is fantastic. The sound is way better than the Echo, but all of a sudden it looks really dumb. Why? Because I can't talk to it. I've tried, and it doesn't respond back. The fridge isn't great either. That doesn't talk back to me. Nothing except, in fact, my family, and sometimes they don't talk back to me either, talk back in the house. The second thing that has happened is I've developed a little bit of an emotional relationship. Not much, but I kind of like Alexa because she's so efficient at doing things like making the alarm work or bringing my favorite radio station without me having to touch anything. And in fact, two colleagues of mine in America told me these stories. One of them, she bought an Alexa, an Echo, for her father, who's 75 and lives in another state and was a bit lonely. So she bought him this Echo and got it sent to him. And she rang him up a couple of days later and said, "How are you getting on with the Echo?" And he said rather sheepishly, "I think I'm falling in love with Alexa." It was a 75-year-old man. Now, an 8-year-old boy who is the son of another colleague of mine, Beiju Shah, he took their Google at Home device, he unplugged it and packed it in the suitcase and took it on holiday recently. And his parents didn't know until they got to the resort and they opened up the suitcase and there was this Google device. And he said to his son, "Why have you done this?" He said, "I couldn't leave Google at Home." And I don't think he intended the pun. So The second thing that's happening here is we can develop emotional relationships with these devices, but not just with the devices, because it's not really the hardware, that's just a cylinder. It's actually the service that is flowing through that. I think this is important because it tells us a lot about the potential that this has. So we've actually been working, excuse me, we've been working at Fjord very hard on voice interface for a couple of companies. One in particular is a large consumer products company. And we've learned quite a lot out of the work we've done over the last 9 months. And some of the things that we're seeing, that we're beginning to conclude, and these are still early days for voice. First of all, the UI is the conversation. So this is a big step forward. The interface is no longer something on a screen. It's actually the conversation you're having, and that's actually very different. The second thing is that it doesn't solve all problems. So you still need to think about what is the interface of what we call least resistance. So for example, with Echo, turning the volume up and down by talking to her isn't very satisfying. You can do it. What you have to do is you have to say, Alexa, turn the volume up, or or Alexa, softer. Now, that's actually not very accurate, because how much softer Alexa makes it may not make it may not be exactly what you wanted. So it turns out, unsurprisingly, for those of you who are engineers, that when you touch the top of it and turn the little knob at the top, it's the only moving part on the Echo device, you get immediate feedback because the volume goes down immediately. And because you get the immediate feedback loop, it's actually a much better way of adjusting the volume. So it's not the answer to everything. It also has an issue and needs very careful design, because you need to make everything happen in sequence. So with a website, you can move around all over the place and you can jump from one idea to another very frequently, very easily. There's often a back button, for example. There's no back button on Voice UI, at least not one that I know of yet. Maybe that'll come. But it certainly won't be a button. So you have to make everything happen in sequence. Then you have to think very hard about context. So walking down the street, talking to yourself, no longer looks as loopy as it did 20 years ago because of Bluetooth headsets. But it may be that wherever you are, you don't want to give Google or whatever it is you're interacting with, your bank, for example, you might not want to give them a piece of sensitive device when you're sitting on a train using voice. So context matters a great deal, as indeed does also the person you're dealing with. So the Echo device is hugely popular in my house with my son in particular, with the 10-year-old Billy. But Billy interacts with it in a very different way from me. And gradually, I don't think they're doing it yet, the organizations who are delivering on Voice UI like this will increasingly be able to detect the differences between their people they're talking to, and will begin to adjust subtly their services. And we'll explore that a bit more in a moment. And lastly, please and thank you. Still work. Being English, I'm afraid, is so embarrassing. I still say please to Alexa when I ask her to set the alarm, and I just don't need to. And maybe that's just an English thing, but I do think that it's very nice when she says thank you back to me. So I think these things are important. They are. They're about conversation. They're about humanity. Now, there's something else happening, which is phone calls are going like that. So in the US, something like 95%, forgive me, I can't quite remember the numbers, 95% of people in 2013 did a voice call once, at least, during a week. That number is now in the low 80s. In fact, yes, in 2016, number was in the low 80s. That is precipitous decline in the habit of using voice. The second thing on this is I met the CEO of an Asian telco recently, and he said they are now actively business planning around no voice revenues in 5 years' time. It's quite a shocking statement. And the third is, have you tried calling a teenager on a phone? Seriously, have you tried interacting with a... So my 15-year-old daughter, Honey, has a phone. She can't use it as a phone. She doesn't know how to. She can do everything else on the phone faster, more swiftly, and more efficiently, and more elegantly than I can. But she cannot answer a phone call properly. I ring her up and I say, Honey, she goes, what? What? And I go, Honey, it's your father. What time do you want me to come and pick you up from the party? Yes. No. Hold on. And then she goes and has a conversation with somebody else. And she'll come back to the phone in about a minute, thinking I'll just be there or something. There's some synchronous, asynchronous thing there, which has got all messed up in her head, and none of her friends use phones as phones, so phone calls are dying, believe me. But there's something interesting happening, because we've just explored this, is on one hand, I've just said phone calls are dying, but a moment before I said, well, we have voice on the rise. So it's quite important to hold that thought in your head. This doesn't mean voice is going away. It just means that one particular kind of etiquette or habit that we have of picking up a phone, no one will understand this in 50 years' time, that's going away. Those symbols matter, by the way. When you're in a restaurant, if you do that signature now, that signature thing, I've seen people have stopped doing that. When they look at the waiter or waitress, they go like that. Because you don't sign anything anymore, you get something to tap out on. So, the first thing is, expect voice interactions not to need a phone. In the very near future, I won't need to pick out my phone to call Honey. I'll just say to something, call my daughter, I need to talk to her. Or get hold of her. Or, Honey, speak to me. And it'll get through to her. I see this coming very soon. And the second one is, don't expect Alexa to stay dumb forever and only respond when you talk to her. I don't want human relationships which only ever work when I speak. I want something to speak back to me. And I believe that we will see, and this is quite a big breakthrough, but we will see these devices proactively talking to us under certain circumstances within the next 2 to 5 years, probably. It sounds like a no-no, but I don't think it is, and I think we will accept it. And now there are bots. And the bots are big. I mean, recently I did a quick survey within Fjord where we're in 24 places now across the world, and I was shocked. I thought we were probably working on 2 or 3 chatbots, and it turned out we were working on way more than 10 simultaneously across the world. So lots of our clients are asking for bots. And bots actually are about conversations. Either conversations with humans or actually between machines, and we'll see more of that happening as well. And people want to use messaging to talk with business, so you may well say, yeah, do we really want to do this? Actually, people are very happy to use messaging to talk to business. And what we're seeing, because we've been developing these for a while now, is some very clear rules coming out. First of all, these things are very closely linked to artificial intelligence. It is not the same thing as artificial intelligence, but AI will increasingly power these. And artificial intelligence is still something that most people don't fully understand. A lot of people make the mistake of believing it's just an automated way of doing stuff. The important thing about it is that it learns and gets better as it goes. And that's the thing that distinguishes it from the computing algorithms that we've used before. The second case is, in a lot of cases, everyone's rushing to chatbots, but actually the use cases are not that strong. The third one is, it's not always easy to know whether you're dealing with a human or a bot. That is a no-no, in our view. And it should always be apparent that you're dealing either with a machine or with a human. The fourth is, bots, of course, don't understand your context very well either. So that will change, and we will increasingly develop technology which allows the bots to understand who somebody is and why they're talking to them. At the moment, what they're just seeing is a stream of text coming through. They don't always communicate with existing business systems either, so they're somewhat siloed in their practicality and their applications. They often try and do too many things at once. They're not very good about handing off when you hand off to humans. That's particularly important. If it's not giving you what you want, there may be a human somewhere, and you're probably desperate to talk to them so that they actually understand the language you're talking, because there's this trust issue with them. And you can't force people to use them. So those all sound like some negatives, but actually there are some positives out there as well. So I don't know how many people have seen Lemonade, but this is Lemonade's description of what they do. It's an insurance service in the US. I'm not going to go into detail about what it does, but this is a way in which you now buy insurance in the US through Lemonade. It's pretty good. It's very elegant. And there's some stuff coming in here, some maps, a little bit of personality. It's fast. This is a very interesting way to buy something. So I talked earlier, again, remember this is market as a conversation, or conversation as a market. So some things are beginning to become clear, and this is now on the more positive side. So we're still in early days of this, but can we kill the message? Thank you. So I've highlighted just a few. So when researched, what we've found is that when you ask people, do you want artificial intelligence to detect and react to your emotions, 87% said yes. I don't think that's necessarily predictable. There's still a debate going on in the design world about whether or not bots should be able to do this sort of stuff. But it turns out that most people are saying, yes, I'm happy for that to happen. I'm actually happy for AI to collect data in order to improve the experience about me. These two are very important. So they're important. They're important because at the moment, here are just 3 relatively randomly selected: Domino's, H&M, and 1-800-Flowers. It's quite difficult to tell them apart. That's not, if I'd shown you 3 websites or 3 apps, you'd have got a very clear brand distinction between them almost immediately. At the moment, it's very difficult to do when you're using messaging as an interface, and no one's actually, Lemonade a bit, really cracked the code on this. So this differentiation thing is really, really important. And I chose this picture because that's my dog, or was my dog, sadly gone now. And that's also my Alfa Romeo Spider. And they're both iconic. They both have immense brand value, just immense. One of them through its redness, and its Italianness, of course. And the other through its kind of Englishness. That's an English Bull Terrier. And it's just sheer stupidity. It's just a beautiful dog. It's got personality. It's got tone. It comes to you. It's proactive. If we're going to create differentiation in a world of UI, voice UI, and chatbots and artificial intelligence, we have to start thinking about how do we bring our brands alive. It's no longer good enough to think about brands as being a logo and a typeface and a set of rules associated with that. That's old thinking. That's all gone. I remember at the beginning of my career sitting in a marketing director's office, and I could see behind her a row of big books which were the brand identity. They're dead. This is all about how a brand behaves. It's all about what it delivers. And that's the only way in which you're really going to be able to create differentiation, because all of this stuff that I'm talking about actually represents quite a serious threat to brands. So how do we get this differentiation? The brands are going to differentiate themselves also partly by how they know you. So the dog knows me and knows how to react to me. Brands need to too. And this is not actually that obscure anymore. The politicians know who you are. In Britain, and in America, we've had 2 elections recently which have shown us, not very comfortably, the politicians and their parties are using Facebook and other social media to understand who we are and then rifle target sometimes not very pleasant advertising at us to get us to change our views, particularly to get us to vote for them. So the politicians know who you are. LinkedIn can know who you are too. So this is a service called Crystal Knows. Has anyone used Crystal Knows? Yeah, okay, a few people. Good. So it's pretty weird. So Crystal Knows scrapes your social media, all of it, assuming that you've got enough public material. It scrapes your social media, and within microseconds, it comes back and it tells you who you are. It's like one of those Myers-Briggs personality tests, but it doesn't take half an hour. It takes a blink. So you can't quite see what it says in the background, but I did this on myself. It says, Mark will get bored when you're too formal. Often preferring casual, good-humored conversation. Try to avoid or reduce structure or bureaucracy around Mark. It's exactly right. It just nailed me. Now, I can use Crystal Knows. Now I've set it up. I can profile any one of you, and on LinkedIn, it will actually offer me instructions on how to create an email to you, which is more likely to cut through and get through to you. This stuff is out there already. It's publicly available. So why not take that technology? I can think of why not, but I'm just putting it out there. Why not take that technology which is already there and is getting better and better and better every day because it's driven by artificial intelligence to create a chatbot driven by AI that can read your personality, just like a human would do. Just like, to some extent, you're reading my body language all the time. Imagine an artificial intelligence which is doing that, understands you because it scrapes your social media, but is also understanding how fast you type, what your face is showing if you're actually using live video, what language we're using, what are the verbal telltales that you have. Because we all actually do this all the time. So psychologists call it mirroring. And mirroring is basically the thing that when you get several people in a room and one person crosses their arms, if somebody is talking to them, they may well, particularly if they like them or they want to impress them, they may well cross their arms as well, or cross their legs, or do any one of a number of different things which mirror body language. But we also mirror words. So it's a very well-known phenomenon, this, but we, not realizing we do it, we begin to adjust our cadence of speech and the language that we're using around the people we're at. Now imagine that you're doing that with a chatbot or a messaging system representing a company, and that company is effectively using what it knows about you, what it's detecting, in order to become more like you, and is getting better as it goes. So the result of that, in effect, is that every brand will be differentiating itself by a multiplier of 7 billion. It's the number of people on the planet. Because if every brand can do this, then every brand becomes a little bit like you. Now, I should pause at this. That's not necessarily a given. And there are some, and there are some brands, like Nike is a good example, probably, where they have such a strong brand personality that they're not necessarily going to let go of that. So I'm not suggesting that in the future I will have a conversation with Nike which will be entirely like talking with myself. I'm not saying that. Because Nike will continue to be able to push a lot of personality at me, which is its own brand personality. But when I think about banks, I'm not sure I can see the distinction between some of their personalities. So I think they have a big problem. I'm not just picking on banks. The same could be said for utility companies, could be said for telcos, could be said for all sorts of organizations, many retailers, for example. So this issue about how is personality communicated through these conversations becomes an existential one for brands, which I think we will spend a lot of the next 10 years figuring out. And more than that, feeling at this stage becomes a medium. Because this combination of technology is able to sense you, then it is going to be a medium in its own, that sensing of you and the ability to deliver feelings to you. Now, certainly me, morally, at this stage, I pause and I think, is this what I want? Certainly it's a massive and interesting design challenge, but it's also a societal challenge. So I'm not sure that I want these things to happen, and certainly it changes relationships, because if you think about what Crystal Knows does, Crystal Knows very rapidly gives a company a power to actually know you better than most people who you talk to. Because and they're going to be predictive at it as well, so they're going to be able to predict your actions as well. So there's some big issues here about what happens when feeling becomes a medium, but it is on its way. And what we've seen is that conversational media, their life cycle is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So letter writing lasted for about 2,500 years, but it's pretty much dead now. Telegrams, about 160 years, they've gone. I'd be surprised if most people in the audience have ever actually seen a telegram. But you may have seen movies with telegrams in. The telephone, if I'm right and the telephone is dying, or at least this is dying, that lasted for about 140 years. Email, I've lost count of the number of people I work with who are much younger than me who say, why do we have to deal with email? Can we not just use Slack? And certainly most of the younger people I know are not interested in using email as a primary medium. It's kind of an old person's game. So I would guess maybe 30 years. Text messaging is gone, I think. Instant messaging on the web, that's gone, pretty much. It's on its way out anyway. So you may say, well, what about Snapchat, Mark? Well, don't know. There's been some rough news about Snapchat recently. Now, okay, this is a bit of a cheat because Snapchat's up against some pretty hard-nosed competition through Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp, etc. So I'm not actually making a prediction that Snapchat is about to die. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that the natural, you can't take it for granted that the conversational medium, which we're now using voraciously every day, or at least teenagers are, is necessarily the one that's going to be around in 5 or 10 or 15 years. Because I think that says, don't take it for granted. And that's all I'm saying with Snapchat. So where is this going? I think we're heading to a conversational singularity. I think we're heading to a place where the conversations we want to have are just all around us and with us and available to us without us having to take out a device and open an app and do something with it. I think the conversation would just be in the ether around us, delivered through those things I've talked about, artificial intelligence, a voice UI, and the digitization of everything. And devices just, at that stage, as far as conversations are concerned, the devices, obviously they're there, but conceptually they've largely disappeared. And just the conversation remains at that stage. And just the conversation remains everywhere and with absolutely everything. And if you really want to push us out, eventually in our thoughts. So we may not need the voice to do the conversation. And if you think that's just pushing it too far, just 2 years ago, we did work with ALS sufferers, where together with colleagues in Accenture, we created, and Philips, we created a mechanic using a mashup of technologies to allow ALS sufferers who can't move or speak to control simple devices like light bulbs and televisions around them just using their thoughts. And that technology has moved on a lot just in the space of the last 2 years since we did this. So brain-computer interfaces, and at this stage I had to stop when I was writing this because I couldn't actually deal with speculating about where that goes next. But I do think that there is a chapter to be written well beyond what I'm talking about, have talked about so far, which is what happens when we just use our thoughts to have that conversation. So what are the implications of this? I've talked a lot today about the etiquette of conversations and how that gets changed. It got changed between the Greeks and Restoration London, and between that and pre-revolutionary France. But it gets changed a lot more by technology. And very soon, machines will know, not all of us, but some bits of us, better than other humans. And that fundamentally changes that notion that Socrates talked about the unexamined life. Because your life is examined. My life was examined. I just showed you on the screen just a few pages ago what Crystal knows about me. That's an examined life, and we're seeing more of that. So these are pretty deep implications, I think, for humanity. What are the questions? So, can we use technology to enhance the conversations we have? Can we go back to the golden age of conversations that I began the talk tonight thinking about? I would dearly love to believe that we could, and certainly if you think about the quality of political conversation, I cannot speak for Italy, but I can speak for my home country, and I can speak for the US. The quality of political conversation has gone downhill very fast in the last 20 years. So I think there is an interesting question, an important question for us all. Can we find our way back to some kind of flowering of conversation as an art form between people? And lastly, given all of the things I've talked about, and given that digital is a technology which can record everything at considerable volume, will conversations effectively last forever? So those letters and the telegram I showed you earlier on, they've lasted for a long time, but they probably won't last forever. But now already there is technology which can capture everything that we're saying. What happens if those conversations last forever? Can we go back and examine everything that we said at any given moment in our lives? That puts a completely different spin on every single conversation we have if you can go back and examine everything you ever said to anybody. So I want to finish on one point, which is only humans, you might start by saying only humans can do empathy and love. And I went to an artificial intelligence conference last week in Paris, and I had this in my mind, and I heard enough there to worry me that there was potential for artificial intelligence to actually do empathy and love. Lots of people are talking about robots, for example, looking after elderly people, which may be very necessary given the aging population. But I don't think robots or artificial intelligence can mean empathy and love. I think that is quite a different thing. So I think only humans can mean empathy and love. So thank you, and remember to love.
Grazie, veramente grazie per questo bel escurso, questa bella ventata di riflessione che ci contestualizza, insomma, la situazione dove siamo e ci fa capire un po' quali sono le traiettorie a cui ci dobbiamo preparare. Questo è un momento anche per le domande, quindi dalla rete piuttosto che dal pubblico. Prego. Ci sono domande dalla rete?
Happy to take questions. I'm sorry I spoke longer than I was trying to edit.
Sì, no, mi spiace per l'orario, ma se resistiamo ancora un po' di domande, diamo un po' di spazio alle domande come è nostra abitudine.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question about the thing we talk about human can love, human can show empathy, but in a way, I think human can make mistakes. The ability to make mistakes and maybe even repeat the mistakes will be expressed in a way, in the development of the digital age, or the conversation we will have about interacting with the artificial intelligence.
I think that's a really interesting question, and I totally agree with you. Of course, humans can make mistakes. I mean, you only have to be a student of history to see terrible mistakes we've made, still make now. But you're right. I don't think I have a good answer to that. I think that part of the design of whatever we're doing now, whatever happens next, part of the design will have to be to countenance the fact that humans make mistakes, and to try and create, if you like, a buffer zone around people and the way they misspeak things, or the way they do things wrong, or the wrong decisions they might make. And I think that we'll see a great deal of design and thinking going into how both in forms of the primary interactions you have with devices, but also in terms of the services that people are offered. So, for example, it's not difficult to imagine banks offering services to customers who may be making financial mistakes, and actually saying to them, and not everyone will like this, but actually saying to them, you shouldn't be doing this. And the same is true for insurance as well. Now, of course, as soon as you go there, you then have some pretty deep ethical questions. So is it okay for an insurance company to say to somebody, you should not be eating 5 donuts a day? Is that fair? Or is it, or is that an ethically wrong thing to do? So I think we're about to enter into a place where we're answering those questions. You're right, because we've assumed people always get it right. But actually, there's a whole thing in design of not assuming that people have got it right, and assuming people have got it wrong, and then designing around that.
Un'altra mano da queste parti, prego.
Hi, Mark. Couple of quick questions. Don't you think that we could get to a point where this kind of tailored conversation with a device such as Alexa, which is tailored to us, could, augment the conditioning that, the company behind it could put in the conversation to have us do something they wish that we could do? Something that even Kubrick showed us in his movies decades ago.
Yes.
And the second one is also talking about this kind of tailored conversation. Isn't it possible that we can get used to it, and we get more and more used to relate to this artificial entity which is shaped around us, and we forget how to relate to other people which are different from us, and to empathize with different human beings, because we're focused on what we feel closer to us, which in this case would be the device.
So I think both are possible. I think in the first case, the challenge that, have you read Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow? This is a really, really good book, and he talks in that about, and this is not just he didn't invent it, but he talks about, it's where I read about it, a concept called framing. So framing is what illusionists use to get people to do what they want them to do. It's not magic, it's psychological manipulation. And framing is a known technique for leading people down a particular path to get them to think about something. There's a very interesting experiment which Kahneman talks about, where they had a whole load of students, and they talked to them about money. But with one set, they introduced a whole set of words which were about old people and had elderly connotations. And with the other set, they didn't use those words. And then they asked them to walk down a corridor to another room to do another test. But the real test was how fast they walked down the corridor. So the people who had been primed with the old people words got up more slowly from their chairs and walked more slowly along the corridor than the students who had not been primed. So that's called framing. And it isn't difficult to imagine that a malevolent company could do that. So yes, I think we do need to, I don't think that's about to happen, but we definitely do need to be monitoring that kind of thing. As for the second bit, I don't know. I remain optimistic that I think we will be able to distinguish between humans and human relationships and those of a computer or a machine for a very long time to come. And I really seriously meant my last point. I think they might be able to mimic love, but they don't mean it. And I think other humans mean it, hopefully. And I think that's very different. And I think our ability to detect that, I hope, will last for a long time.
Yes.
Prego.
Hey, Mark. Thanks again for the talk. I'm wondering, like, you are really positive about like artificial intelligence and all that comes with artificial intelligence. But like, don't you feel that we have a world that is going at different speeds, and also like cities and rural areas that goes at really different speed? Don't you think that we are risking a breaking point, a rupture?
In what?
Like in the society in general, like also between like big cities and rural areas, or like the way we approach to people.
So I do actually think that we're quite close to some difficult breaking points, not necessarily the ones you talk about. I worry more about the distinction between, or the differences between, for example, the healthcare which we know we can have scientifically, and the healthcare which society can afford for us to have, and which we can afford as individuals. And then you add into that aging population, I think you get a very dangerous dynamic. I worry about the split between what The Economist calls people who believe in open and people who believe in closed. Now, in my country, from my point of view, wrongly, a small majority voted for closed, which is why we have Brexit. So I worry about that quite a lot. I think there's also some things in technology we should look on very positively here. So artificial intelligence carries incredible potential to solve that first problem I talked about, because it does carry incredible potential to accurately understand what is wrong with humans and diagnose and begin to suggest the right things. We're seeing this very, very clearly with things like radiology, where the accuracy rating of artificial intelligence very quickly is much greater than any single doctor or any single radiologist. Now, if you begin to multiply that out across all medical areas, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know whether it can be applied to all medical areas, let's say most, you begin to get to a place where you can get very significant cost savings in the way in which we go about healthcare. So I think without that, we have a huge societal problem coming at us quite fast. With it, possibly, we have a way of working our way around it.
Okay. Thank you.
Ancora una domanda dalla rete? Prego.
Sì, Maria Grazia, abbiamo
Vai.
una domanda dalla rete. Mark, you have just mentioned a lot about the vocal interfaces, but what about the gestures interfaces as gesture recognition, for example?
Yes, I probably should have said that. I mean, for me, the gesture thing is all part of it. We use gestures all the time. In a way, again, going back to the emoticons, I think, or the emojis, they are a way of, because you have emojis that wave, they are a way of putting gestures in. There's also some other really interesting stuff around gestures. So something I read recently, actually I was taught it on a course, is that there's a fundamental difference between people's body symmetry, depending on their psychological type. And it's a bit difficult to go into all of it, but just quickly, there's a certain sort of person who has what's called a very asymmetrical body style. So they will typically sit in a chair like this, they'll use one arm to wave around, and that asymmetrical style is very strongly associated with creative people and with people who care much less about structure and are much more interested in ideas. Then you will have a symmetrical body language, which is where people talk like this. Their body language is very, they won't slouch like that, they'll sit straight, and they will be quite precise in their gestures. So typically you would want your lawyer to have symmetrical body language. A lawyer with asymmetrical body language is not one you want to hire. Equally, if you're looking for somebody to do something wildly creative, you may not want somebody who uses this kind of gesture and has very symmetrical body language. So again, this is stuff which computers can be pretty easily coded to recognize. We all probably recognize everything I just said intuitively, even if you hadn't heard the theory before.
Io direi che ci fermiamo qua, so che le domande sono tante, ci fermiamo ancora qualche minuto, rompiamo le righe. Ringrazio veramente Mark per queste suggestioni, grazie per essere veramente...
Thank you very much.
L'applauso dice tutto. Prendiamo nota delle tue suggestioni, ci rivedremo presto e vorrei utilizzare la sua espressione. Be human in the digital area.
Yes, edge. Very good.
Edge.
Very good.
Yeah.
Edge. Thank you very much.
Grazie a voi.
Grazie.
Vi ricordo l'appuntamento del 5 luglio a base. Veramente molto bello il tuo
Thank you.
talk. Molte grazie. Molte grazie. 5 luglio, base con Giorgia Lupi, il tema dei big data, la visualizzazione, il racconto, la conversazione che passa attraverso i dati. So che qualcuno qui con la morte delle mail non sarà molto contento. E poi volevo ringraziare volontari e creativi che ci hanno sostenuto, da Videodrom, social reporters e i fotografi della scuola Cavendish. Questa volta l'ho pronunciata bene. I ragazzi che avete visto girare con la macchina fotografica sono di una scuola, volontari che ci stanno sostenendo con il loro lavoro e la loro creatività. Grazie a tutto lo staff di Mediaguru e grazie a voi per aver pazientato. Alla prossima. Buonasera.